The original Dead Space is one of the most well-known and critically acclaimed games ever, with it earning itself a good score of 89 on Metacritic, and also being crowned the 11th best Xbox 360 game of 2008, and the 8th most discussed Xbox 360 game. Dead Space was developed by Visceral Games, published by Electronic Arts, and released on the 13th of October 2008. It became a huge hit due to its influence from Capcom's Resident Evil 4, its space horror setting, oftentimes disturbing imagery, and its innovative gameplay. The gameplay of Dead Space innovated on the third-person shooter style seen in Resident Evil 4 by removing tank controls and making aiming your weapon much easier. But by far the biggest and most well-known innovation that came from this game was the dismemberment system. In most games you were encouraged to hit enemies in the head in order to defeat them, but in Dead Space this system has been changed so that your only way of killing the various creatures seen in the game is by removing their arms and legs. So, now that I've said all that, you may be wondering, if the original Dead Space was so good, then why would you want to make a remake of the game? Well, despite how good the game generally is, it has quite a lot of problems now after all these years of being out. Especially on the PC port, there's a lot of bugs such as your character lagging out when running on certain floors, frame rate problems that cause things to not work, and issues with the way your mouse works, to name a few. The game can also feel rather clunky at some points, which is pretty annoying when you're trying to fight off enemies. But with that said, many people often worry that a remake of a game will not be nearly as good as the original. And with that, I'm afraid to tell you that, well, the Dead Space remake is absolutely brilliant. I haven't quite beaten the game yet, but I can tell you it is a massive improvement on what made the original game so good, but it also does keep what made that original game so special in the first place. The game keeps everything unique to Dead Space, such as the dismemberment mechanic, but builds upon the original game's gameplay by now giving you a wider field of view, less clunky feeling controls, and reworked zero-gravity combat, which now sees the player floating around freely like in Dead Space 2, as opposed to jumping between different surfaces as seen in the original Dead Space. Honestly, the gameplay in this remake is probably the best in the series. It takes everything the original did well and builds upon it, as every great remake should. The combat feels really smooth, and the dismemberment system is further improved upon, with the ability to break away parts of the enemy's bodies while you're shooting at them. And while this has been seen in other games, such as Doom Eternal, I don't think I've seen it done better than it has been done here in the Dead Space remake. This feature really adds a surprising amount of detail and depth to the game that wouldn't be there if it were not included. All of the game's weapons feel great as well. My personal favourites are probably the saw gun thingy, and of course, the plasma car, which despite being the first weapon you get, is undoubtedly the best weapon in the game. The enemies are great too. They feel extremely similar to the original versions, so I think that is a pretty good thing, as I don't think they needed much change in the first place. Now let's talk about the game's visuals, because to be perfectly honest with you, they are pretty good. I wouldn't say they're absolutely insane, but I will definitely say that it's one of the best looking games I've played in a long time. The remake's graphics let us finally get a better look at what lots of the game's world, weapons, and enemies really look like. The Dead Space remake runs on the Frostbite engine, which some of you may already know for being the engine that Battlefield 2042 runs on. But while BF 2042 was an absolute dumpster fire, Dead Space makes brilliant use of the engine and creates an amazing looking world for you to explore. I think one of the main highlights of the game may be its lighting. It adds something to the game, but I can't quite put my finger on what exactly that is. Although I will say that sometimes the game is a little too dark in some areas, where I believe it really shouldn't be. Something I especially like the look of though is the sections where you're floating outside the ship. These areas just look really good. Another thing that was done really well in the visuals department is Isaac's suit. I love the way this looks. It looks similar to the original, but at the same time is a lot better looking in my opinion. For those of you who don't like the new suit, well, there's a solution for you. You can use the original game's armor as a cosmetic skin in-game, and you don't even have to buy it. How nice of you, Motive and EA. So, overall, the Dead Space remake is a massive improvement upon the original Dead Space, and it's honestly one of my favourite games now. Despite not finishing it yet, I think this is one of the best games I've played in the past 365 days, better known as a year. I really hope that this game wins Game of the Year later on in 2023, because I think it deserves it. I haven't really had many issues playing the game either. Yeah, there's a bit of stuttering every now and then, but that doesn't really take away much from the actual game, and it can be easily ignored. And apart from that occasional stutter, the game has basically no bugs from my experience, which is really cool considering how many big games have been broken as of recent. But have you played the Dead Space remake, or have you not? If you have, then let me know your thoughts down in the comments down below. And while you're there, I recommend giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel to help push it out to more people who also like Dead Space and would like to join in on the discussion. I also recommend joining my Discord server, as it's a great way to make new friends, and trust me, the people there don't bite. If you would like to further support me and funding the videos on this channel, then I would recommend checking out my merch store, as I'm sure you'll find something you like on there. But other than that, thank you for watching, as always, have a nice day.